Today we'll be focusing on David Pakman, who is a popular left-wing commentator. He's known for his debates, and he does specific call-ins to talk about various topics, usually political, but sometimes he has spoken about veganism. A YouTuber by the name of JVegan32, who definitely needs more subscribers, I'll put a link below in the description, called into the David Pakman show, and he subsequently made David look a bit silly. So let's have a look at it, shall we?
Hey, David.
How are you?
My question is,
Yes.
how do you justify eating meat, dairy, and eggs?
Who do I have to justify it to?
Immediately, he seems to take quite an evasive route. I don't think he would ask this question if it came to some sort of like human context, or maybe even killing other animals like dogs or cats. Would he immediately go, who do I need to justify it to? I don't think that you would. It's like he seems somewhat comfortable to actually, honestly, engage with this topic, and we'll kind of see as this goes through. No, I have seen this already. I went over this in stream and I was deeply disappointed. He decided to call this vegan caller confronts me, wants me to talk to a cow, which we will see is not a very honest framing. And spoiler alert, I was going to mention this later, but it's actually really good news. His audience seem a lot more open-minded and aware than he is regarding this topic. And I didn't see one positive comment for his view. Stick around if you want to see some of those comments.
When there's a victim involved, wouldn't you have to justify it to them?
I don't know. Is that if you perceive that there are victims, every victim gets an explanation? I don't even know what you're saying.
Well, yeah. So like if you or someone decides to eat meat, dairy, and eggs,
Yeah.
and if animals are dying for that decision
Yeah.
that's being made over and over again, do you feel like you could justify making that decision to that victim who has to suffer and die for it?
Like, for example, when I have my cappuccino, could I go to a cow and say, tell the cow why I'm drinking their milk, for example?
Yeah, like that cow who had to endure multiple pregnancies and then be separated from their child. And then, of course, if the child is a male, the males in the dairy industry they always get separated on the first day of life. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes they're killed on the first or second day of life. And this process will happen over and over again to the mother cows, like several times, until they can no longer produce milk any longer. And then they'll ultimately get sent to the slaughterhouse.
Jay Vegan probably didn't think David Pakman would engage in what seems to be a bit of slippery behavior, because it's quite clear to anyone that no vegan is asking you to go up to a cow and ask them whether or not, you can I justify this to you, Mrs. Cow, taking away your baby from you? Can I do that? And will you moo back, in solidarity, or will it be more of a sad moo? It's quite clear no vegan is asking you to do that. But Jay Vegan entertained it to some degree, probably thinking, oh, David's not going to be a twat about this, is he? But no, he decided to be a little bit of a twat about it, didn't he? So I'm actually getting kind of annoyed reliving this experience. It was bad enough on stream.
So yeah, like in scenario that you're painting, like with the cappuccino, do you think that there is a moral justification for consuming animal products if it's not a necessity, if we could just be using plant-based alternatives instead?
So the problem I have with this entire framing is that it's so absolutist and narrow, and it's not really like the way the world actually works. So for example, sometimes you follow these things to their logical conclusion. Like, I read a lot about this, and hopefully you'll indulge me for a moment.
Let's remember what he says there. I've read a lot about this.
If we say, okay, eliminate all animal products whatsoever, great. So that now puts an incredible strain on a handful of crops, which now need to be grown in dramatically larger quantities in order to replace all of those animal products.
So no, he hasn't read a lot then. We have various reports stating that we'd actually have to use less of these crops, less land, if we didn't include animal agriculture, i.e. we were part of a plant-based food system. You saying you've read a lot and then concluding the absolute opposite is just bizarre. I mean, never mind all of that, just think about it. Like, we're talking about 70 plus billion land animals who need to eat, some of whom have a higher recommended daily intake of calories. Feeding them for an extended period of time only to kill them, we're obviously going to be using more resources.
This creates absolutely massive monoculture farms, which are absolutely terrible for the environment.
And again, monocrops are not a problem of veganism. Animal agriculture is responsible for these monocrops as well. It uses these products. It's really weird how non-vegans want to blame vegans for non-vegan problems. So act as if these problems don't already exist in a non-vegan world. Oh, now because you don't have the solution to all of these problems that, by the way, actually would improve if we went and did what you are asking us to do. Big problem. How can you say you've read a lot about this and then spew this nonsense? I don't understand.
Many of these monocultures require absolutely bonkers amounts of water.
If you have an issue with water usage, then you should 100% have an issue with the animal agriculture industry. You said you read up about this. It's really embarrassing at this point, isn't it?
Also leads to many, many animals dying, everything from mice to, all sorts of other things. And
yeah, unless you believe in this degrees of separation and think we're equally responsible for anything that happens down the line, that's not a direct, result of the purchase that we're making, then this doesn't hold. And again, if we're using more resources, more land, more crops, more water, in order to actually include animals in our diet, our food system, and other systems where we consume them, then it would make sense to conclude that, this would be actually less of a problem, an easier problem to tackle if we weren't including them, if we went to a plant-based food system. Yeah.
So we can do the entire thing that I gather is what you would consider to be morally right, and then we would still end up killing so many animals by virtue of how we restructure and reorganize what humans eat.
Bearing in mind that when we restructure it, we'd be reducing the problems to begin with. But is this an argument? Like, we could do the morally right thing. However, there would still be deaths as a result of the change that we make. Okay, is it less? Are your claims actually the case? No, they're not. Spoiler, big spoiler, not the case. We can't not bother just because there would still be some sort of negative consequence. We've got to weigh up what the consequences would be and if we would have something that's improved. And we can demonstrate that, there would be an improvement. So why are you pushing back?
Are we really better off by killing different animals through drought and monoculture, etc.? I mean, I don't know. You tell me.
It's just so disappointing to see David go down this route. Again, he's acting as if this is some sort of problem that would come about if veganism were the case, when it already exists. This is what we see in front of us, monocropping. Why is he pretending that in a plant-based food system this would be a bigger problem when the consensus demonstrates the complete opposite? I'm going to lose my mind, David.
So
how do you justify it to them?
I would be interested in responding to that counterpoint that you brought up, but you did kind of not answer the question I asked, David.
The answer to my question is I don't know what I would tell a cow. I've never spoken to a cow, so I don't know.
It's hilarious because he's the one who posed the idea about talking to a cow. Jay Vegan did not do that. And then his response is, well, I don't know what I'd say to a cow. We can see this in real time, and luckily a lot of your audience saw this as well.
But what I'm telling you is it's the type of question that's really just a black hole. It doesn't really go anywhere in terms of answering the broader questions about how would we feed the planet on 5 monoculture crops that would have to be exploded, 1,000,000% in order to replace all the animal products. You're not answering that question to me, which is okay too.
Yeah, it doesn't answer the question when you're not very honest about, the information, or maybe you've read something in an article and it's completely skewed you in the opposite direction to what we understand to be the case. But you're going to be very confused and fall into this kind of infinite black hole of not having knowledge because your knowledge is off completely.
You're not answering that question to me, which is okay too.
Okay.
What I'm telling you is your framing is arbitrarily narrow and sort of myopic.
Well, I can respond to that counterpoint that you bring up.
Okay.
But I do want to say that, about the meat, dairy, and egg industry, like, it is like terribly, terribly cruel, the standard practices of meat, dairy, and eggs. So
yeah, I'm with you right there. I'm with you right there. The standard practices are horrible. What I do is, I eat very little red meat, for example.
Don't worry, guys. Only if you do a little bit of rights violations, it's absolutely fine. If you just do it on a Monday, then cool. The rights violations don't really matter all that much. And if you know where these animals are being killed, you know what farm they're at, suddenly that makes so much of a difference to them. Thank you, David. Yeah. You got it right.
And when I do, I try to know exactly what farm is it coming from, where I could drive and see what are the conditions. I think that, like, for example, I'm on pasture free.
Just because someone struggles to find their words doesn't necessarily mean too much, but this seems like a pure cope. Notice how he's using these kind of buzzwords like pasture. Like, what difference does that make to a victim when they're going to be killed? What difference does it make to them when their whole life they're going to be exploited? There's a plan to use their bodies and commodify them. Oh, they were out in the grass though. Oh, okay, cool. That was fine then.
Stuff where I know exactly where it's coming from. I'm doing certain things for myself.
That was it. That is it. Beautiful. Okay, that is what I needed to hear. I'm doing certain things for myself because that's essentially probably what it boils down to. That is a big assumption here. I'm psychoanalyzing, but it's seemingly more for his own sake, so he doesn't have to feel guilty, things that he's doing for himself. But he's not the victim in this equation. There are clear victims, and he's acknowledged that, standard practices are horrible. So, if it's horrible, what happens to these animals in these conditions, then that would suggest a level of understanding on your part that they are indeed these individuals with the capacity to experience and therefore, feel good feelings and feel some really bad feelings or sensations. So you'd probably then acknowledge that, yeeting them out of existence is probably not a preferable thing for them. So ultimately, they're still a victim, even when you add these buzzwords to your consumption.
But I agree with you. The standard practices are terrible. You and I are on the same page.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and then just to touch on like the resource intensive subject that you brought up.
Yeah.
So actually, when you really look into the amount of resources required that it takes to produce, like, raise livestock and breed these animals and then raise them to slaughter weight for meat and then also for dairy and eggs, when you look at how much water and crops and resources are needed for all these different kind of animal products,
yes,
it is just like unbelievably intensive on the environment. And
you're absolutely right.
You're
absolutely right.
Crops. Like, if you've ever seen Cowspiracy, like they that's a documentary free on Netflix.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Like,
Cowspiracy,
they go into all
I saw
that
it,
stuff.
and Cowspiracy is fine, but it's also lacking a lot of context and information. What you also have to consider is, if we replace all of those products, what are they replaced with to meet certain caloric needs? It ends up being a very small number of things that can do it, which generates monocultures. That's very bad for the environment in new and other ways. Jay, I gotta run. I've given you almost 10 minutes. I know we're not gonna agree, okay?
Just one more. I just want to say, like, okay, about the amount of crops, like, it's always less crops to eat a plant-based diet.
Man looks so uncomfortable. I'm so shocked that he even bothered to take this call, because he's looked uncomfortable and evasive throughout the entire thing.
But you still haven't answered the question: is how do you justify eating meat, dairy, and eggs when there is a victim involved? And you said that
I'd
you
have
don't,
to
you have
think
never
about how I
spoken to a
talked to
cow.
the cow, Jay.
Yeah, the cow. No, where was this? Oh my God. David, what the fuck, man?
I told you, I think that those
Well, talk to
questions are
me because I want to
philosophical
talk
black
on the
holes.
cow's behalf. The cows are dying for
All
their
right, Ben.
decision to put the
Jay,
milk in your
I've
coffee.
given you
So I
more
just want
time
to
than I
know,
give anybody. I gotta let
how
you
do
go,
you-
okay?
All right, well, think about it, David.
All
Thanks
right,
for
I'll think
taking my.
about that. Thank you. Boy, see, this is why I tend, when I saw the user was Jay Vegan, I almost got away from it. But I do regret that. I do regret that.
Yeah. And you probably should regret that because you ended up looking like a right silly Billy. And even non-vegans in the chat were disappointed by his contribution. David, your callous, flippant, uninformed Fox News type attitude to this caller was monumental letdown to most of your viewers, as shown in the comments. Would like to see you post a follow-up video addressing your audience's reaction to the things you said here. Sorry, David, I'm not even vegan or vegetarian, but everyone seems to agree you didn't exactly raise good points here. Wow, David Pakman has no clue about current land use, water usage for animal agriculture, and how intensive resources are being consumed by animal ag. Totally clueless. David is usually so well informed, but here he doesn't have a clue. He obviously hasn't read a lot about this, and it's been disrespectful to the caller who never said he should talk to the cows. Base. Can we please acknowledge how David is the one who introduced the imagery of talking to a cow, and then he mocked the caller for it a few minutes later? So I'm disappointed in some ways. You know, we've seen this multiple times. People who otherwise, you know, are very strong and seem very good faith, just as soon as veganism comes along, something happens to their brain. But what I'm really happy to see is the responses. There were loads of non-vegans in this comment section just decimating him, just being so disappointed with his behavior and calling it out. And that's brilliant. It kind of confirms to me, you know, my idea that, you know, even when people are spitting absolute nonsense, I think we should keep the faith because, you know, when that's platformed to the world and people can see, people are pretty smart most of the time. They can see when someone's, you know, being a bit evasive, not being very honest, and that bodes really badly for the position that they're holding. Sometimes it's the anti-vegans who will do the vegan advocacy for us. And I think this was a very strong example of something that will probably plant a seed in people's minds. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Did you see the stream that I had looking at this live? And if you did and you watched this, thank you. That's based of you to watch it twice. You know, endure this again. And let me know that you liked it by smashing like. That's a very good way to let me know that you're happy. I've been Vegan Gaze, providing you with that vegan content. I do hope you're well. And until next time, salads. I will see you soon.